All right. Welcome to today's webinar, Global Human Capital Management Solutions, Open Enrollment and Advanced Benefits. My name is Lisa Tandy, and I work in marketing for data intensity. Before we begin, there's just a few items that I'd like to review. Today's webinar is scheduled to run for about 45 minutes, and during the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode, but we will conduct a Q&A session at the end. Questions can be submitted at any time using the question window on the right-hand side of the webinar interface. Today's session is being recorded, and we will email you a link when the recording becomes available. Our speaker today is Lauren Kopek. Lauren is the Senior HCM Functional Specialist at Data Intensity. And now I'll turn it over to Lauren.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Lisa said, my name is Lauren Kopek. I am the Senior HCM Functional Specialist for Data Intensity, so there's a little bit about me here. I've been working pretty much solely in the advanced benefits space for the past almost 5 years now. And every year I've done quite a few open enrollments, so I think we're clocking in at around 12 right now with 3 more coming up this year. So been very busy in the benefits and open enrollment space for the past 4 or 5 years now. This is my area of expertise. This is what I enjoy doing the most. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about what you can do with advanced benefits or open enrollment and offer you some tips and guidance on how you can make your open enrollment more successful. The presentation is targeted a little bit towards customers who are already using advanced benefits. If there's anybody on the call who's considering using advanced benefits and hasn't really gotten, they're deciding whether this is something they want to do, feel free to just pop into that question window and let us know so that if you have any questions, we can make sure that we address those for those of you who are not yet using advanced benefits. There will be some screenshots and things like that that will give you a sneak peek of what advanced benefits looks like if you don't already have it. For those of you who do, they'll look pretty familiar, so we'll talk about some of the details that are there that you can use to make your open enrollment better. Our agenda for today: online enrollment using advanced benefits. I've grabbed some screenshots from a couple of different instances and situations that we've come up with that show you some useful things that you can do with online enrollment and how you can best use some of the instruction text to guide your employees and give them a little bit more information, as well as some new things that have come out with the Roll-Up 7 patches. So for those of you who may not be familiar with what a roll-up is, every year, Oracle bundles together all of their patches and enhancements prior to the open enrollment season. They call them a roll-up pack. Every year gets a new number, so we're up to roll-up 7. You'll often hear these called RUPs, so you see down here on my presentation later on, RUP 7. We'll talk about some new things that are coming in RUP 7 that are already available. If you've already upgraded, you have these. If you're waiting to upgrade, they'll be coming. That offer you some extra functionality that's needed for this next coming year. So we'll talk about how to best prepare for your open enrollment, some tips and tricks while your open enrollment is running, some steps to close out your open enrollment, a few suggestions on reports that can help you manage your open enrollment, and we'll talk a little bit very briefly about some new features that are out there for compliance with the Affordable Care Act. So these are new things that are out this year for the 2015 plan year. There's some new compliance requirements that Oracle has made some enhancements to address. So that's what we'll be doing today. And at the end, we'll have some time for questions and answers. So if you have any while I'm speaking, feel free to pop them into that question window, and Lisa will make sure that I get to them and answer as many as I can today. So here's a quick peek of what online enrollment with advanced benefits looks like. For those of you who do already have advanced benefits, I'm sure you've seen this page before. You've either enrolled yourself and this is what you've seen, or you're very familiar with looking at it from the employee perspective. What we're looking at here is a snap of the initial page, the benefits overview page. So if I'm an employee and I log in to take a look at this, this is what I'm going to see. It shows me a summary of my current benefits and offers me some information. Up at the top, we see a few interesting things. We describe what the Update Benefits button does. That's always a little bit confusing, but you'll notice if you see, please click here to access the Benefits and Wellness page on SharePlace. So this is actually a link that this particular company has provided to their employees to show them all of those benefit documents that you guys worked so hard to put together and put out they've chosen to put them out in digital format on their SharePoint and link to them here. So employees are able to go in and view those in line with their enrollment. And we'll see on the next page that they actually link to each set of plans within the enrollment screen. So if I have any questions as an employee, those documents are right there for me. This takes a little work to set up, but it's really, really useful when you're running an open enrollment, especially if you have a lot of employees. They can get to that information. They can develop better questions about the offerings as opposed to questions about how can I find this information. So we see a great example of that here. This is a snap of what the healthcare reimbursement and dependent care reimbursement looks like. So they've linked those specific documents here. They've made very clear how you go about enrolling. So one of the things that we always like to recommend that you do as part of your open enrollment planning is take a look at this instruction text. If you're not using any, maybe now is a good time to add some. If you are using some, you want to make sure that it's correct and that it's useful to your employees and it's descriptive. So the reason I bring this up, one of the enhancements that has come out with the Roll-Up 7 this year is the ability to actually collapse these blue areas. So I can actually click on dependent care reimbursement account and I can collapse that subject area. So instead of having to scroll all the way down the page, which is a frequent complaint, instead we can now break these down into individual pieces and I can compare plans closer together in a different order. So now with that ability you can also add more text because the employee can hide the text that they don't need to see anymore. So you can add more details, you can add more links, you can put in a lot of information here, and the employee can select to read and not read at any one time what they would like to see. Here's another good example of what these instructions look like. I always like to use this one because this is one that has a certification set up on the life insurance. So we are seeing more of this in benefit setups as the benefits world is changing recently. We are seeing a lot more requirements for evidence of insurability on life insurance. So this is what that setup looks like to the employee. You see this little certificate mark next to the 3X salary option. That tells me as an employee if I select that, I'm going to have to provide that document. It's a little visual reminder of what you need to provide, and on the final screen, it actually shows you exactly what you need to provide, and in this case, it actually gives you a link to the form as well. So that's very handy for those of you who may have that change coming through this year. And this is the final summary screen, so this is just in here as an example of what the final view can look like. I included this because another piece that has come out with RUP 7 this year, you can now actually email confirmation statements. So for those of you who are using the confirmation statement functionality, you'll remember that there's usually a button right above this text that's not shown here due to space, but there's a little button that says confirmation statement. There's now actually a batch process included in the application that lets you take those statements and email them to the individual employees in one distribution, which is great. We're actually testing it right now in another customer, and it's working, and it's very handy to be able to do that kind of distribution instead of a print and mail. So that I included this here just so I was sure to remember to address that. That's one of the big changes that has come through with RUP 7. So preparation for your open enrollment. The primary goal of everything I'm going to describe in this open enrollment preparation is you want to get to a place where you can execute a complete dry run of open enrollment. That's really important because it will let you identify your errors, any data issues, any people that might have an ongoing problem that's going to interfere with open enrollment ahead of time. It saves you a lot of time when you go to do this finally. It saves a lot of stress on your benefits admins and your technical representatives to make sure that this all runs smoothly. The more time you have to do this, the better off that you'll be. So this is a timely presentation. We're getting to the point in the year where this is when this process will begin. A lot of you will have enrollment windows coming up in September, October, November timeframe. So you'll be working on this probably now and going forward into the fall. We suggest you start as early as possible. Plan to test any changes or even your base configuration 1 to 2 months ahead of your scheduled open enrollment. My personal recommendation would be to do as soon as you possibly can. Just run through it, make any tweaks, run through it again. It saves you time and effort later on to make those incremental changes now. So 1 to 2 months, that means probably starting right around now, you'll want to be doing these configuration tests and making the plan for open enrollment. So the first step is to create, if you don't already have one, or if you do have multiple test environments, identify which one you're going to use as a dedicated environment for open enrollment. This is really helpful. There's a lot of payroll year-end patches, HR patches, if you run procurement, if you know, financials, any of those things in your same environment as HCM. There's a lot of testing that has to happen. It's really, really helpful if you have your own environment. I know it's not always possible due to resource restrictions and things like that, but if you can have your own just for open enrollment testing, or just for open enrollment and maybe the Rough 7 testing, or however you break that down, this is really, really helpful. You'll want to make sure that it's a new clone, so you'll want to make sure that you've cloned down from your production environment as close to your testing time as you can so that that data is current. People make changes to their people records all the time in HR. You know, their job changes, their location changes, maybe their salary changes. People get hired, people get fired. You know, the data is always moving. So as soon as you can, clone it down, make sure that it's fresh so that when you run your testing, you're running it on as close to your production data as you can, so you can identify those data issues. And you'll want to obviously make sure that you have checked and installed any required patches prior to testing. This one is important this year because RUT 7 does include those ACA fields that you will need to have to help with your ACA compliance. I guess in theory it's possible that you don't do this and you create a field separately, but Oracle has delivered some of those key fields so that you can use them for reporting, you can use them in eligibility, makes your life a lot easier. So this year is a big one to make sure that you've checked and installed your required patches before you test. Setting up your open enrollment. So this is kind of a quick run through of the basic steps for setting this up. You want to check your payroll calendars and plan your overall schedule. When do we need to have this set up by? When is the open enrollment window? When do our vendor files need to be distributed? When are our checks issued with the first deduction? This depends a little bit on your organization, how long you give your employees, whether you need to send out mailings. You know, this is a kind of a window that moves. That's why every company has a different window. But you want to make sure to lay it out as best you can from now until the end of the year so that you have a clear schedule to follow. Once you've done that, you'll add your year periods to the program. And this is a big issue that I see sometimes. For those of you who might have older HR setups, make sure that you have pay periods defined in the system for next year. For whatever reason, sometimes if you were implemented back in 2005, 2006, 2007, they gave you 7 years of pay periods, or your schedule changed and somebody only built 3 years or something, and you don't have pay periods. If you don't have pay periods, you can't assign deductions to employees, and things get ugly very quickly. So this is an important tip that I always throw in when I talk about open enrollment. Make sure you have your pay periods defined for the next year. While you're in there, maybe do the year after that so you don't have the same problem next year. You'll add the scheduled life event for the open to the program. This is probably already sitting out in your setup, but you'll define your dates for this year, your enrollment period, and when your enrollments will close. And this is another big problem that we have. You want to make sure that on your program setup, and if you have questions about any of these setup steps, feel free to reach out. There's a contact slide at the end of this presentation that gives you some email addresses that you can use to reach out if you need some guidance or help with this. But the reinstate code, there's a function that allows you to basically install an undo button on your open enrollment. And this says if I have to, for some reason, back everything out, if I have to undo this on every employee, save those enrollments so that when I run it again, my employees don't have to go back in and re-elect. I often see these not used or not used correctly, but these are really important because if there's a mistake, if something happens, a rate was wrong, you need to be able to have that undo button to just roll everything back and then push it back out without having to send out an email to all of your employees saying we messed up, we need you to go back in and enroll. So this is really handy, and if you need guidance on it, feel free to reach out, but these should always be set up. And they're helpful on any life event, but on the open where you know that you have every employee who's going to be processed, this is a really important detail. Once you've got those basic pieces set up, you want to end any existing plans that are no longer offered, and make an action plan if you are going to end a plan, if you're going to be moving them to a new plan, if you're only cutting back to so many offerings. Identify how you're going to handle moving employees around from a plan that you're ending. And if you're adding any new plans, then you'll want to set those up as well. If your eligibility depends on the use of service areas, you want to just verify that the area definition is still current, that those zip codes haven't changed, that you haven't added any areas that maybe aren't in there, or you haven't expanded an area. This is not as common anymore. I'm not seeing as many service areas, more departments, divisions, employers, that kind of thing, more so than service areas. But I always throw this in there because it's an often forgotten one. If you use service areas, you just want to make sure that they're still correct. You'll define your default enrollments. If you're adding any new plans, evaluate the need for a custom program to move employees to a new plan. So this is called the default enrollment rule. And what this does is it tells the system, if I was in plan X, then enroll me in the same option in plan Y. So these are handy, but they do take some time to develop, and you do have to test them. So if you do need to do something like this, you'll need to allow time for development and testing. And if you need any help or guidance with how this is done, or development work to do this, feel free to reach out to us. We have some standard ones, but we also can offer you some guidance and consulting on how to do this and develop one of these. So if that's a need that you have, feel free to reach out. But there is a way to do it. It just takes a little time, and it is a customization. You'll want to reset the coverage start for your healthcare and dependent care flexible spending accounts. That's a federal requirement. You must re-enroll every year. So you'll just reset the coverage start to be the first of the year. You'll update your rates. So you're making sure that all of your employees get the correct rates for the next year. If you've got any increases, etc., this is where you'll update those. And you will identify a plan for tracking the ACA full-time and service hours balances. So I don't want to go into too much detail about the Affordable Care Act, because that could be a whole presentation of multiple hours. So the long and the short of this, there are new fields that allow you to track somebody who is full-time under the ACA rules instead of full-time under your own organization's rules. And there's also a new balance called service hours that tracks the total, so that you can feed that with an employee's worked hours if you do have cases where someone moves in and out of eligibility. We'll talk a little bit more about those on my sort of discussion about the ACA at the very end. But a big problem that I have seen this year in talking to customers is that they really haven't thought this one through yet, but this is part of the requirement for plan year 2015. So if you have any questions about using these fields or the best way to handle this kind of thing, feel free to reach out. It is part of what you'll have to do for next year. We've done all of our setup, and we've defined our plans, we've changed our rates. We'll do some final checks before we run this mock open enrollment. So you'll close any unprocessed life events. Any employee with a current life event, new hire, marriage, divorce, status change, salary change, doesn't matter what the life event is, they won't receive the open enrollment opportunity if they have an open life event. So you'll want to close them. Oracle provides a forced close mode for this. You just want to make sure if you do have employees who have valid enrollment windows, so for example, a new hire who's still within their 30 days, you do want to make sure that you talk to them and let them know that you're going to be closing them down to run open enrollment. Just a little, it's nice to do. I guess you don't have to, but it is a nice thing to do. Because once you run this forced close mode, it's going to close every open life event unless there's some kind of error that prevents it, but otherwise everybody's going to get shut out. Once you've done that, clean everything up, you'll run your mock open enrollment, and you'll check those error reports and look for any data issues, duplicate enrollments, any of that kind of stuff. The seeded reports are pretty good for this in terms of showing you what the error is and who the person is. You want to double check that your rates show the new rates. And this is what I was discussing earlier. You want to ensure that your self-service text and any links that you have chosen to use there are current and they are tied to those current documents. If you've changed vendors, if you've added a new plan, you just want to make sure that the new documents are attached. We've gone through all of that. We've closed our life events. We've run our mock open enrollment. We've enrolled some employees. Everything looks really good. So we're going to migrate all of that setup to the production environment. You will run your life event, scheduled and the default enrollment process. And you run them in that order. This is important. Once you run that life event schedule, you've given everybody the open enrollment opportunity. The default enrollment process is what's going to commit their enrollment. So either let them keep what they have, default them into nothing for the dependent care, commit that so that they don't have to go in and enroll in order to save for the next year. So that's a really important one. They must be run in this order. If you run the default enrollment process and you haven't run the life event, it won't do anything. And you'll get an error report that says there's no life event to process. So those are the two steps that you'll need to do. You'll have to resolve any errors generated by either process. Hopefully you've taken care of the big issues from your mock enrollment, but there's always little data changes or, you know, somebody's a termed employee or something like that that needs to be resolved first. On an ongoing basis, you'll be helping your employees enroll, make benefits decisions, however you handle that process. Once your enrollment period is complete, you'll run the closed enrollment process. Once this is run, employees cannot make any further changes, so you only run this when you're done. Usually it's a couple of days after the enrollment window actually closes to give any benefits admins or HRIS or however you operate your organization a few days to make any changes that they need to make or fix anything that they need to fix before you close everything down. A few helpful tips that I found over the years doing this. There's a delivered batch process called Manage Open Enrollment Window. And you can use this to change the dates of your enrollment window or extend it after the enrollment has been opened. Sometimes it's some, you know, the cases I've seen this used have been there was a multiple day power outage and the system was down for that amount of time and the window needed to be extended for that. Or a vendor change was made last minute, the window was pushed back a week, so they just added a week on to the end to give employees some more time to decide. Whatever reason you need to do this, this is available so that you can make that change without having to back everything out and start over. You can change the dates of your window with this process. There is also a process called Reopen Life Events. So if you did, on our last slide, you did run the closed enrollment and for some reason you find that you need to reopen it for all or even a particular employee, maybe somebody was out on leave and they need another couple of days to enroll and you're going to allow that, you can use this process to reopen that life event after it has been closed. You can also use communication types to monitor the progress of open enrollment. This is another kind of larger topic, so if you do have questions about using communication types to monitor progress, feel free to reach out to us. The contact info will be at the end of the presentation. This kind of offers something approaching real-time monitoring. It's not quite that, but it will send notifications when particular actions have been taken, so you can kind of get a very light feel of how many people are enrolling and what plans they're changing. Once your open enrollment is complete, you'll just want to run a quick life event report and make sure that all employees have an open enrollment life event. Even if there's no changes, which I've never been in an organization where absolutely no employees changed anything. But if that situation was to happen, you still want to verify this because the open enrollment assigns the rates for next year. So any employee who didn't get one won't get their rates updated. So this is important. You want to make sure that every employee processed through the open that needed to process. So obviously termed employees and things like that don't need to go through. But it must process on every employee who will need to have new rates for next year. And this is a pretty simple one to do. You can take a look at the life event. There's a summary report that's generated when you run the process, and you'll just take a quick look. Does that count match my count for eligible employees? Great. If the number is close, that will at least get you there. You'll want to verify the element entries. Did employees get their new rates? I know you guys did an awesome job and you tested this in your test environment and you're sure that they did, but go into production and grab a few and just make sure that they really did get their new rates in production. Last year we had somebody come to us in April and say my rates were wrong. So really want to double check on this while you're beforehand, so you don't have to go do any adjustments or anything like that. Make sure that everybody got their new rates, that they're starting on the correct day, everything looks right. Verify that your coverage for FSA plans is as of the first of the next year. I finally had to add this disclaimer. Unless you operate on fiscal years, in which case your plan year is different, For FSA plans, the coverage must start as of 1/1 of the next year, so you must re-enroll every year. So just want to make sure that that went through as well. Some notes about the post-open enrollment kind of limbo phase between when your open enrollment is complete and the first of the year. Once open enrollment has been processed, any life event that occurs between the date that open enrollment processed and the first of the year will back out the open event and any elections the employee made. So typically we see this for marriage and birth events. Someone has processed their open enrollment, they have a baby or they add a spouse in December, and they want to make sure that they add them for coverage. These life events should be evaluated kind of on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes the enrollment rules say that the coverage wouldn't start until the first of the next month anyway, so if this happens in December, you can simply back out their open event and let them include their dependent in that. If your coverage starts the day they're eligible, then you'll actually have to back out the open event, put in the subsequent event, and reinstate the open event. These must be manually kind of handled on a case-by-case basis. There's no good way around it. It's one of those future-dated things where running this ahead of time kind of blocks the system out for the end of the year. So when you are deciding on your open enrollment window, this is a helpful thing to keep in mind, that there will be that span of time where you'll have to manually process those subsequent events. So the earlier your enrollment window is, the more that you'll have to do this. So something to keep in mind. A few suggestions for things that might help you manage your open enrollment as far as reporting goes. And if you have questions about developing reports for benefits, or you need some guidance, or you'd like some reports developed, feel free to reach out to us. We have resources for this. But here's my suggestions for things that will help you. A report that will show you life events in detected, manual, or unprocessed status. So these ones are events that have been triggered or otherwise put out there by an employee that you want to make sure are not interfering with the open. Another one, enrollments with no elements, duplicate rates, or employees with suspended coverage. So these are kind of funny one-off situations that you want to make sure. But enrollments with no elements means the person is enrolled in the plan but for whatever reason does not have a deduction associated with it. So that's an important one to make sure that that doesn't happen. It's pretty rare, but it does sometimes happen if someone is if they're on leave or things like that where they're not actually receiving pay. Sometimes you do see this happen. Pending action items or certification, if you are using those components, not everybody is. But if you do have them, a quick query that will show you whether anybody has those out there so that you can follow up on them will help you. And if you do have a new plan and you're migrating employees to that new plan, a quick enrollment report to verify that everybody got migrated where they were supposed to get migrated is a handy one. So some quick notes about the Affordable Care Act and advanced benefits. So I know you all are eager to hear about this. The RUP 7, so that's Roll-Up 7, the patch set for this year, includes new fields in support of the ACA eligibility requirements. There are a few new fields pertaining to rehire, including the last date of rehire. That one's not as important for the Affordable Care Act, but it does matter for the VETS 100 reporting. If you are using Core HR and you are running that out of Core HR, there are some new fields related to VETS 100 and the equal opportunity employment. There is a new field that sits on the benefits tab of the people form. It's called ACA full-time, and it's a yes/no field. So a person who is ACA full-time is someone who has worked more than 130 hours in the preceding, I believe it's preceding month. I'm not an attorney, so don't hold me to that. And this field lets you track whether someone is eligible under the ACA or not. I'm not aware of the specific organizational requirements for each of you who are on the call, but if you do have questions about using these fields or devising a plan for how you will track ACA eligibility, feel free to reach out with us and we can have more of a one-on-one conversation about it. There's also a new payroll balance called ACA service hours that lets you track a running total of hours worked for employees in order to use both of these fields. So just a little brief touch on what is coming with RUP 7. This RUP 7 is available now. I shouldn't say coming, but most companies are still working on installing it. So we have those fields available now, and they are useful for your coming year. So here's our contact information. I'm going to leave this up while I'm open to questions and answers so that if you want to scribble it down, you can feel free to. I do believe we are recording this as well, so if we are, then you will receive a notification when this is recorded, and you'll be able to follow up on this if you didn't, for some reason, able to see these. But you can either email services@dataintensity.com, we'll get your query to the right people, or if you specifically have queries about support services for open enrollment, for your advanced benefits setup, any of those type of questions, feel free to reach out to Martha Ho, so that's just mho@dataintensity.com. She is the Director of Managed Services for DI, and she oversees all of that, so she can certainly get your query to the right place as well. So I'm available for questions, and it looks like we have a couple at least floating out there. So do you know where I can find more information about system enhancements around the Affordable Care Act? So there are white papers that Oracle provides about their timing and planning for Affordable Care Act compliance. These are available if you have access to my Oracle support. Then you can go in, and if you actually search for, I believe it's the health care position statement, you'll be able to find the long-range plan for Oracle's support of the requirements for the Affordable Care Act. Pretty comprehensive document, a little bit long, but if you read through it, you'll be able to find out what is planned for each year and what's available now. There's also a question about, can I use OAB to administer a health spending account alongside a high deductible health plan? So these are becoming very common, where you choose to offer a high deductible health plan to keep the premiums low for your employees, but those come with a health spending account. You can administer those in OAB. It looks exactly like a regular health plan and a flex spending account. So you set up a new flex spending account, you set up a new health plan, and you can actually tie the eligibility of the HSA, the health spending account, to enrollment in the HDHP with a post-enrollment edit rule. So if you need help setting something like this up, or if you want a better idea of what this looks like, feel free to reach out and we can show you an example and give you some guidance for that. Do we have any other questions out there?
I think that might be it, Lauren. Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you, Lauren. It looks like that's all the time we have. If we didn't get to your question here, we'll follow up with you directly after the session, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation. You'll receive an email that contains the link to the session recording as soon as it is available. And on behalf of Lauren and Data Intensity, thank you again for attending. Goodbye.